Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to City Hall Council Chambers for the first council meeting of the new term, December the 8th, 2014. Welcome back. Welcome back, re-elected councillors, and a special welcome to our newly elected councillor, DeGenova. Welcome, and also to our city staff. Welcome back. We're embarking on this new term tonight. We were all sworn in today at Creekside Community Centre. Council took our oaths of office and assumed the responsibilities for which we were elected. And as is traditional at that swearing-in ceremony, I gave the mayor's inaugural address. I understand a video of that inaugural ceremony will be available on the city's YouTube channel tomorrow. It's not ready yet, but it will be available tomorrow for anyone who wishes to see that. And before we go any further in this agenda, I'll ask Madam Clerk for the roll call, please.
Mayor Robertson's in the chair. Councillor Louis. Councillor Stevenson. Here. Councillor Deal. Here. Councillor Jang. Here. Councillor Reimer. Here. Councillor Meigs. Here. Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr, Councillor Affleck, and Councillor DeGenova. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and again, welcome to everyone here and tuned in. So we have a very straightforward agenda today for this first council meeting of the new term, with a number of communications that are before us for consideration. And the first of those communications before us is Communication 1 on the agenda, which contains my recommendations for appointing a deputy mayor and acting mayor and a roster of council representatives for the period December the 8th, 2014 to December the 31st of 2015. And I will therefore move those recommendations and ask for a seconder. Councillor Louis, a seconder, and we'll initially I'll speak to the recommendation that is before you. We have had a practice here in council with deputy mayors rotating, councillors rotating as deputy mayor, and to my knowledge there isn't another city in our situation that has had a model like that. Most cities either elect or appoint a deputy mayor or mayors. In many cases there are several in larger cities, and in those cases the deputy mayor is the representative for the mayor when the mayor is unable to attend typically protocol events, but and as well the acting mayor role is one that with signing authority for the mayor and who steps into the mayor's chair in the event the mayor's unavailable, and the mayor can designate that acting mayor to take charge in any given situation. So we have these roles obviously embedded in the Vancouver Charter. We've had a practice of rotating. I bring this forward as a way to basically align with best practice in many cities that have a clear deputy mayor approach where both citizens, both internal and external parties understand the deputy mayor. Our system, I think, is challenging that way, as it changes every month. And my goal here is to standardize the system, enable flexibility with annual appointments that are made by council for deputy and acting mayor, and to continue with the practice that we have of rotating through council for a council representative in the event that deputy mayor or acting mayor is unavailable to do a protocol or event opportunity, that the council representative is then the next to take advantage of that opportunity and represent mayor and council at that event. So that is the backup approach to having a deputy mayor represent more formally, as we've seen in other cities. So at this point, there's no compensation change that is related to this change in the structure. What I would envision doing is bringing forward to council a motion in the new year to prepare terms of reference for a compensation review that looks at these adjustments, a new structure for deputy mayor, acting mayor, and council representatives that addresses through a third-party review the current workload that's on council. A lot has changed in the several decades since there was a change related to compensation and the system that we have today. Certainly email didn't exist, social media did not exist, and the pressures of our growing city, particularly around engagement, consultation, connection to different neighborhoods, as well as the opportunity that has come up a number of times around councillors working more directly with neighborhoods, similarly to what we saw with the neighborhood planning process last term for neighborhoods and 2 councils in each neighborhood that were active liaisons in those neighborhoods. So I would see that council is able to consider some terms of reference and a process using a third party to bring back recommendations to council related to all this and really updating the approach that we have here related to compensation, to the workload, to the support staff that is available to council, which I know compared to every other big city that I've been in is very lean, and it's a challenge for council and staff to manage the correspondence and the activity. So that is around the compensation piece and changes. It's not embedded in this motion specifically, but it is something that I would see bringing forward early in the new year as a next step to make sure that the roles and responsibilities of all of council are fairly compensated for. The support that council has to do the work of the people is appropriate, and that we have an opportunity to have best practice recommendations from a third party on that front. So that's the next step beyond these initial changes to structure of our deputy mayor, acting mayor, and roster of council representatives. And my recommendation initially for this year ahead of us is for Councillor Andrea Reimer to be our deputy mayor in accordance with Section 207 in the Charter, that statutory role. Councillor Raymond Louis is as acting mayor in accordance with Section 209, the acting mayor section of the Vancouver Charter, and that the role, the roster of councillors through the year is specified in the motion as well. And that is my recommendation to council. And I have a couple people to speak on this, beginning with Councillor Ball.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I have had a number of questions since this actually went out, and perhaps, and I've been listening to your explanation, and perhaps you could help these questions that I've received and also help myself understand. Right now, when we serve the role of deputy mayor, we get the invitations that the mayor is not able to attend. We either attend them, which most of the time we are able to do, and anything we are not able to attend goes on to another councillor. We also cannot leave the city during the time that we are deputy mayor in case we have to serve as the acting mayor. This is what I was told on my first time around at council, so I presume that has not changed. So the deputy mayors, as they are now working at council, do serve both those purposes. I think the questions that came to me that were somewhat confused as to what problem will be solved by splitting out the 2 duties, and how will the councillors by month actually serve that purpose? Are they going to serve both of those purposes in terms of your plan here? Because obviously there's the deputy mayor and the events and that process, the ceremonial process. The way your plan is written, do you mean that if that deputy is not able to perform those events as now, that a councillor would go out and serve that purpose, but they wouldn't be called the deputy any longer? They wouldn't be a deputy mayor, they're just the councillor they are. And what happens if, as the charter requires, that council appoints a acting mayor, if and only if something has happened to the mayor. What happens if the acting mayor that you have put here is out of town and something happens? Then where does council go with this? So I am somewhat confused, and I think the letters that have come to me have been somewhat confused about what this actually means in practice and why. So if you wouldn't mind sort of helping to fill us in here a little bit more, that would be great. Thank you.
So to your questions regarding basically a chain of command and responsibilities specific to the acting mayor, first of all, if I'm unable, as it states in the charter, if I am absent or signifies my intention of being absent from duties through illness, departure from the city, other cause, or my seat is vacated, council may appoint a councillor to be acting mayor. That's the recommendation that I've made is that it's Councillor Raymond Louie in this case who would be taking charge of those duties in that scenario. The charter doesn't isn't specific to what happens if the acting mayor isn't available. And I could ask the clerk for clarification. My understanding was that with an approach like this, that the deputy mayor would be the next to take up an acting mayor role if the acting mayor was unavailable. And from there, if we're down to the fourth person, it's the council representative and onto that roster. So that's my understanding. There's no specific wording in the charter, unless, Madam Clerk, you have anything else to clarify on that.
Mr. Mayor, within the charter, under Section 209, when council may appoint an individual to be acting mayor in your absence, and during that time, either one or the other would need to be here to perform the functions under 209. Should both the acting mayor and the mayor be absent and it require legal documentation to be signed, based on the wording of the charter, it would require that council appoint someone other than the acting mayor to take on that role. So in this event, should council agree to have Councillor Louie as the acting mayor, should the mayor and Councillor Louie both find themselves absent and be unable to sign legal documents, like say representing the mayor, then council would need to appoint another acting mayor.
Yes, and I guess that's where the confusion happened and in the questions, is are you then expecting the councillors as they're now required to be in town during the roster that you now have set out, in order that they could, if necessary, serve the purpose that they would have served originally, as they do now, as the deputy mayor? And that isn't clear in the process here. So I just would like to have that straightened out in terms of where you are going in terms of that, because it does say that it's council that appoints the acting mayor if you're absent. So I'm confused when you're not absent and you are here, and why council would be doing that now. So that is a confusion for us. So I'm wondering if we need to be in town, because that was our commitment, that we do not leave town in case we need to serve as deputy. If deputy no longer means acting mayor, which is what it has meant, then there's just some confusion here.
Madam City Clerk, you want to?
Mr. Mayor, previously what was done was that when council made the appointments of acting mayor and deputy mayor, they were actually appointing the same person under two sections of the charter. So you were appointed as deputy mayor to perform in the capacity of deputy mayor. You were appointed as acting mayor to perform in the capacity of acting mayor. If the month went by and that if the new acting mayor was unavailable, the previous acting mayor could not serve in the capacity of acting mayor. It was during that 1 month period. The part that could be transferred was, and what we did do was the role of deputy mayor, which is in essence largely a ceremonial role, attending events and such. But the acting mayor rests with the individual. It doesn't transfer.
Okay, but if something happens to the mayor and the acting mayor is out of town for whatever reason, then what happens, and does it relate to the roster you have?
What council would need to do in that instance, if both the mayor and the acting mayor were out of town, and a document needed signing, either one, the document be couriered to the individual, or if the individual was totally unavailable, then council would have that prerogative of meeting for a special purpose of appointing an acting mayor.
So it would require another action of council.
It would require another action.
In case of an emergency, we were all taken to the emergency center and told that, you know, this would be part of our duty. So I'm trying to define what the actual council representation means.
Under this, what is being proposed by the mayor, in carrying the title of deputy mayor, well, not deputy mayor, but with this roster, there would not be the requirement that you remain in town. There may be an obligation, but there would not be a requirement that you be available. It would be a roster, and it's my understanding that this roster would be, if the mayor is unavailable to attend an event, and the deputy mayor is also unavailable to attend an event, then essentially this roster would come into play.
So it would be the same duties without the title of deputy mayor, but no requirement to stay in town, and no expectation that you would serve in the emergency or anything that happened that month that would have to come back to council?
That is my understanding. You would not, with this roster, they are not acting in the capacity of acting mayor under Section 209 of the Charter.
So you are losing a service that you have now. I guess that was the question that came.
In this instance, it's that role would be played by one individual rather than on a rotating basis, on a monthly basis.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr is next.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My questioning is really along the same lines as Councillor Ball. I too remember well the day of visiting ECOM as a new councillor at the beginning of my term, last term, and being told, I mean, it was probably the most onerous thing I was told, which is when you are deputy mayor, in the case of an emergency, you will be the one, and the mayor is absent, not available, you will be the one that will have to sign the documents related to declaring a state of emergency in the city. You will be taken to this location to do that. These are the protocols. This is the safe where all the codes are. If no one is here to do it, like, I mean, this was a very onerous set of responsibilities that I took on. So then, in speaking to staff here, I was informed that as deputy mayor, I would not be allowed to leave town, so I didn't go out of town. And so I'm wondering if that's the same case. Well, we didn't have any acting mayor at that time. Now, I'd like clarification. Did we perform before the role of acting mayor and deputy mayor de facto? Number two, if that's the case, under the code, Section 209, it says clearly that the acting mayor has all of the duties of the mayor. And then under Section 207, that the deputy mayor may be assigned some of the duties. And so I'd like clarification on what those differentiation of duties are. I'd like clarification if it is the acting mayor that must be in town all of the time, which might be difficult for Councillor Louie, given that he's going to be the chair of FCM. I'd like clarification on what the other duties if it's simply not protocol but attending meetings that are of not as high relevance, or what is it that the duties of the roster of councillors representing council are to be?
Okay. I mean, Madam City Clerk, I think clarified that those roles, in past practice has been that council has appointed both of those roles to the roster of councillors. So whatever month it is, it's a member of council that is both deputy and acting mayor for that month.
It was.
They've been joint roles
Right.
that have, and in this case, it's splitting those roles to two different people. And in terms of requirement, what my sense in looking at the bylaw or the charter in this case is that it may have made sense at the time when they wrote it, but there's a lack of clarity around who backs up who, acting versus deputy, and I would suggest it would benefit council and the city for us probably through a bylaw to clarify exactly what the sequence is, so that there's backup at all times, and my suggestion is that acting and deputy can back up each other, and if neither are here, then it's the council representative by the roster who is the next backup person. So it builds more redundancy into the system in a situation like that, but the charter is not specific to that scenario. I think there were far fewer people here then and no airplanes, and so I think we may need some clarification through a bylaw, and had some back and forth with Madam City Clerk about this and how we might do that in the new year. But for now, this is the basic requirement around making these appointments and recommendations to council.
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, I think the charter is clear on the duties for acting mayor. To read from section 209, the acting mayor shall have all of the powers and duties of the mayor. So it's very clear on that. It's also clear that in terms of the deputy mayor under section 207, that the deputy mayor may be appointed, and council may confer upon him or her in this case, such as the powers and duties by this act vested in the mayor, as council shall think fit. So the charter is actually clear. What's unclear, Mr. Mayor, is the actual proposal in front of us, because it doesn't specify which powers and duties are conferred upon the deputy mayor, which the charter says it should do, as opposed to the acting mayor, which has all of the powers and duties. So I know that we're discussing this motion. I'm feeling very much at odds about my ability to vote on it, not having any specifications as to what the duties are of the deputy mayor, as the charter requires us to do.
Yeah, well, the definitions are in the charter, and so the recommendations that I'm making in terms of appointments are for the roles of deputy mayor and acting mayor as read in the charter, and that is my larger concern, is that when it comes to unforeseen circumstances, and a number of people, myself and acting and deputy out of town, having a clear protocol there is going to be really important. So that is not what's written in the charter. We have definition around the roles, but it's not as specific as it might be, and that's up to the province to change that. But I think council has the leeway and responsibility to be able to clarify this through a bylaw and what we put in practice. And that's what I'd like to see here is if there was an emergency situation, for example, and I was not available, out of town, or otherwise incapacitated, acting and the acting mayor was not in town for whatever reason, or unable to assume those duties, trying to get council together to pass a motion for who is the next acting mayor. I think it would be better to actually have that already agreed to, that we have a sequence that we follow there. As it is right now, we would have to come together, and if it was an emergency situation, that could be a challenge to actually appoint an acting mayor if the mayor and acting mayor were not available in a state of emergency situation.
But wasn't it already clear? Like, isn't it in a past term? What was clear was we were acting in rotation as both acting mayor and deputy mayor, i.e. it conferred upon us was the duty, for example, to call a state of emergency if that were the case. So council wasn't, there was at no time I was informed that council will have to be called together to confer that power. That power was in fact vested in us by the roster of rotating deputy mayor.
No, I think the roster was specific to the acting mayor of the month, but if that acting mayor, that councillor was not available or out of town for whatever reason, that did not automatically advance. We've had a practice with events and protocol events that it does get passed on to the next person in order, but that's, I think, just been a practice of council historically, and that's where I think it would be good to be more clear going forward with a bylaw that just lays out how we do this, both with acting mayor responsibilities and with deputy mayor protocol events, which we could be in the same situation where there's too many events and we actually need a sequence that people can understand. Okay. Next up with questions, Councillor Affleck.
Clear as mud. So I want to make sure I understand this. The deputy mayor does not have the acting mayor responsibility. I saw the clerk nodding yes to that, as it previously was, correct? So in the past, the deputy mayor was simply a thing you'd go to events and you had no actual power, correct? Not as in the acting mayor. Can I get clarification on that?
Previously, the individual that was acting mayor was also deputy mayor for the month. Each are appointments made under different sections of the charter. So they were vested in the same person during that month, but they are distinct duties. The Section 207, the deputy mayor, traditionally it has dealt with the protocol events, more figurehead type role, whereas the acting mayor, the appointment under Section 209 speaks to what Councillor Carr was speaking of, signing documents in, or declaration of emergency. They take on the role of the mayor in the event that the mayor is unavailable. So they were vested in the same person, but they were that was appointments under different sections of the charter to the same person.
Okay, so they were the same person. Deputy mayor was acting mayor per month. Just want to make sure we got that clear previously. Moving forward, we're looking at changing that. Can I ask the clerk or the city manager if we ever had to utilize that person in the role of acting mayor? Certainly, I don't know if we have in the last 3 years. I certainly know in my 3 times as deputy mayor, I was never utilized in any acting mayor responsibility in any capacity. And I'm wondering what, as Councillor Ball sort of alluded to, what is the problem we're trying to solve here if, in fact, we don't utilize that person? And as you mentioned, Madam Clerk, that you can simply courier documents in the situation. The only thing I can imagine is that perhaps the mayor himself is planning to spend a lot of time out of the city, or perhaps not a lot of time in this chamber, and he wants a guarantee of somebody who might be here, and maybe the mayor can clarify that if there's an intention on his part not to attend. And if that's the case, I worry that Councillor Louis, being his second choice, being above the deputy mayor, from what I understand, might be the wrong choice given his attendance records in the past 3 years, and certainly moving forward with FCM and Metro Vancouver, where he will have a significant role to play and significant attendance issues here in the council. So I worry about that. But I wonder if the city manager or Madam Clerk could at least answer the question on whether we've had to use the acting mayor role in any issue in the last 3 years. Do we know?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can shed some light. It's a role that I believe is used infrequently. I am aware of one example of where it was used. Actually, it was in the time of Mayor Larry Campbell.
10 years ago, probably.
Pardon me?
Oh, 10 years ago, then.
Yes. Now, perhaps the mayor is in a position to respond. That would be documents that the mayor would be available to sign. It would be things such as bylaws, as an example, would be one that requires both my signature and the mayor's signature. And so, in that instance, the acting mayor would be able to sign those bylaws. I can't say that I've experienced that in recent years, but it's the one example that comes to mind.
So a significant amount of power being bestowed upon a person that the people of the city did not vote in the role of the mayor potentially is happening here. And if you were to analyze it based on votes alone, perhaps the secondary role in council and the acting mayor should go to the person who got the most votes, which would be Councillor Carr, perhaps would be the best choice for the people of this city to be the acting mayor in the role. And certainly her attendance record's very good in the last 3 years. I assume that will continue forward, although she will be on SCM, I understand, so maybe you won't be as much. But I don't know. I know I've attended a lot of meetings, but anyways, perhaps the mayor can clarify on a few of these points for me to understand, why the choice of Councillor Louis as the basically providing him a significant amount of power when you are not available in a massive way, I think, and I don't think the people of the city perhaps understood that when they voted for you as the mayor and us as councillors. And as again, I refer to the fact that who got the votes in this chamber, and perhaps those people should be looked to as the ones that the people of the city would like to see signing bylaws or anything like that.
Well, yeah, Councillor Affleck, I mean, my recommendations around Councillor Louis and Councillor Reimer stepping into these roles, in part is reflecting they have chaired committees of council, the 2 committees of council for the last 6 years, very capably, and certainly have been serving several terms and very experienced in the matters of the city. One of the duties that the clerk didn't mention that does come up in a timely fashion is sign off on debentures and some of the city's financing issues. And that was one where I felt Councillor Louis' role as Chair of Finance for many years, overseeing budget and finance, would put him in a position where signing off on major financial transactions, something he's very experienced at. In addition to that, and I think that's your question specifically on those pieces. As to my activities, I am continuing to chair the Big City Mayors Caucus of FCM, and this we anticipate to be a busy year ahead with the federal election in 2015. So I do anticipate some travel related to those duties, as well as some international work with the work that we're doing with cities on the climate front, and particularly with the climate commitments that are coming up, both national governments but also city governments that are working at climate commitments going forward. So I do anticipate to have some travel, not necessarily out of step with what many mayors before me have done, representing the city, and at the same time, I feel this is not that big of a change in terms of acting and deputy roles. They've been merged in the past, and I think it's prudent to split these roles and recognize that there are different functions, and we need more clarity on what these roles are with annual appointments versus it constantly changing every month. Any more people speaking to this? I don't have anyone else on the queue. I will call the question then, seeing no further speakers. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, sorry, if I may, I would like to make a motion to refer this report. Given that you intend to provide a report to us in the new year, as you indicated, I think it might be prudent for us to refer this report until after we receive this third-party report, or this motion that you intend on bringing forward to clarify what's in this report. That might provide, because as you can see, we have a lot of questions. That I think there's not a lot of clarity on this. I would like to make a motion to refer this report until that third party, or whatever it is that is completed, and until that time we continue on as is with rotation as indicated in the recommendation here. No, I don't have it in writing. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk. But so my intention is to refer this report until following a third party report on the mayor, the deputy mayor, and acting mayor, and until that time, we follow the rotation of deputy mayor as indicated in this report.
Okay, a referral motion is in front of council. Madam Clerk is just typing that up. And speakers two, I'll do an amendment queue here. You want to go on that queue? I've got Councillor Jang on the amendment queue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm not in favor of the referral. I think that, from what I've heard so far from Madam Clerk, yourself, and even the questions raised by Councillor Affleck, Ball, and Carr, nothing functionally changes. We still have a roster that rotates when somebody can't go. So nothing functionally changes anyway, so there's no reason to refer it. The issue of referral, I mean, I think in regards to the third-party report, that has to do with other issues around that, including workload, how we get better engagement with communities in this regard. So it's not necessary at this time, I don't believe, but I think that if they're worried about not getting their turn as being deputy mayor and get to prance around town, I know you love that job so much, you love it, that it's simply not necessary at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Carr to the referral motion.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will support the referral motion, and I will support, I do love that deputy mayor role, but it's not for that reason. The reason is that I am very unclear as to the differentiation of duties between the acting mayor and the deputy mayor, as I said in my earlier comments. And I read the charter to require that council, in the appointment of the deputy mayor, section 207 of the charter, may confer upon this person, deputy mayor, such powers and duties by this act vested in the mayor as the council shall think fit. I have no roster of duties in front of me to say that this is what we're conferring upon the deputy mayor, whereas the acting mayor has all the powers and duties of the mayor. I need a clarification as to which of the duties that are all of the power and duties of the acting mayor may be conferred upon the deputy mayor when we have a constant acting mayor. It's very confusing to me in terms of those two roles and what purposes that they would serve. And if it's just in terms of the roster of councillors that are listed month by month, only protocol issues in the event that the acting mayor and deputy mayor aren't there, or if there's other kinds of duties that are expected, I would like to have that full information to decide upon. And I think coupling it with the issue of, which you stated right in the beginning, I think a very good idea in looking at any examination of changing of the roles, the remuneration and the clarity around those roles to take place through a third-party review. So I think that Councillor Affleck's motion referral does make sense in this case, but not to leave the city in the absence of a deputy mayor to follow through with the deputy mayor roster or the councillor roster as is in this motion, just for now having those people as deputy mayors as we have had in the past, which has included acting mayor.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Carr. Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will support the referral on this, just on this one issue, just because I think it would be really, really helpful to answer the public's questions, our questions. The one that actually I didn't get to ask earlier was, again, is towards this issue is why not just combine, if you really want to have only one deputy and the acting mayor activities rarely, if ever, happen, then why wouldn't you be just recommending one position? And so, because there are so many questions that we have that are, legitimate questions, they're not trying to stand in the way of anything actually moving forward. It's just being able to understand it. So, if we could have a little more time, a little more clarity on what the actual roles. And in terms of being deputy, I do think that the communities that we visit are very, very happy to see the deputy mayor there if you're not able to be there. And regardless of who the deputy mayor is, that to no longer be able to represent the city as deputy mayor doesn't hurt us, but I think it does affect the actual communities that one goes to. So you may want to think about that in terms of rather having the councillor representing council to be able to retain that title. But even if you wanted to have a regular deputy, um, uh, it wouldn't preclude you being able to just continue as we have in the past. But I would appreciate if we were able to have a little more time to see this a little clearer, work on a little more, and then perhaps we would be able to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ball. I have myself on the queue, and then Councillor Louis. I'm not going to support referral. At this point, these changes are very specific to recommending two of the councillors to take these roles on. There's no change to the duties, the responsibilities. Those are in the charter currently. So they continue to be, we're status quo in terms of the duties of those two roles. And in terms of clarification, I think it will be important to do that clarification in future, but for the appointment process and the recommendations in today's initial meeting I think these are appropriate changes to make. And then the timing on further work that needs to take place, whether that's on adding some more clarity around roles of both deputy, acting, and council representative, and also the compensation piece. There's a body of work that needs to happen there. I don't see any merit in delaying this appointment process now, which as a standard happens in the first meeting of a council. So we're clear on that direction, and we take on that next step in the new year to do the next phase of work on this. For now, we have the charter in place that provides clear direction on those roles. Councillor Louis.
There appears to be some confusion on what the acting mayor's role is and what the deputy mayor's role is. Seems to be the reason why the request for additional time after another study on this external consultant. There's no consideration.
Your microphone button is not working here. No. Do you want to try Councillor Deal's mic?
Hello, Councillor Deal.
Hello, Councillor Louis.
There we go. There is no doubt in my mind that the roles of deputy mayor and acting mayor were contemplated by the legislatures that wrote into our charter this definition, that one is very clear in its role in terms of its acting, but we also need to give meaning to that legislation in the fact that it did define a separate and distinct role by naming a deputy mayor. So two distinct and reasoned decisions made by our legislature to give us this type of definition. So then we examine the roles of what they do. It seems to be that there was some concern that the acting mayor would take on all the roles and responsibilities of the mayor. And that exactly is what was contemplated when that piece of legislation was written, in the event that the mayor, as described within the charter. But that's no different than what we currently undertake or have traditionally undertaken in terms of our roles as a combined deputy mayor and acting mayor role. So that person, formally rotating, would have taken all the roles and responsibilities of the mayor in the instances where, as described within the charter, they were absent, the mayor of the day. The deputy mayor also seems to be creating some confusion in terms of what roles and responsibilities the deputy mayor has. And from what I understand, from what the mayor has described, it's no different than what we had traditionally done in terms of rotating the deputy mayor position through the council, except in this instance, it's being named to an individual rather than rotating. So in that situation, that individual would take on all the roles and responsibilities of the protocol. And so, Councillor Carr, and Ball and Affleck, we've all been through at least one term, Councillor Ball 2 terms, of this rotation of how the deputy mayor would serve in that protocol position. And that's no different than in this instance as well. And so there's no, in my mind, a big change from the deputy mayor position than what we've traditionally done. And then subsequently, in the event that both the acting and deputy mayor are not available, of course, the council representatives could take on that role as well. I would say, though, that the aspect of the acting mayor and not having the acting mayor available is, again, no different than it currently is with our past practice. When the mayor is not available and the acting/deputy mayor was not available, council would have been required to convene and appoint another acting mayor in those instances. And that is exactly what would have to happen in this instance if the council were to pass this, that the mayor is not available and myself would not be available as well. Then council would have to reconvene at that point in time as if we would have to do it as we had, if we were to follow the existing, previous existing protocol. So there's no difference in that whether or not we would have to convene again. Lastly, I would say that as acting mayor/deputy mayor during my time on council, I have dealt with noise bylaws, and I've dealt with, flyovers by aircraft, are a couple of things that that I've had to deal with as in my role as deputy mayor/acting mayor. And bylaws, of course, are signed by the mayor, and haven't had that opportunity. I don't think I have. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks,
People love
Councillor
seeing your
Louis.
name on the noise bylaw.
Closing comments to the motion, Councillor Affleck.
Appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I'm concerned. I really urge you to support this referral. I think in light of the mayor's commitment to good governance and to being committed to looking at this council as a whole, I can't help but think this is a political decision to put two vision councillors, one of them arguing his case here tonight. It's unfortunate, and I would say that given that the mayor intends to present a motion, it sounds like, in the new year, to deal with this, what clearly is a confusing issue, I do not see the challenge of why waiting a month when you have, don't worry, Vision, because the next on the roster is Tim Stevenson, Heather Deal, Kerry Jang. You guys got till March. You've got till April before NPA gets in there and is deputy mayor. So you got 4 months for the mayor to deal with his motion that he wants to bring forward to address this very confusing issue clearly to all of us, and I think to the people of this city. I think it's the best decision we can make is to refer this, wait for that report. There's no rush. I don't think, as we know, as we've heard from staff, there has been no need since Larry Campbell was mayor to use the acting mayor position. So what is the sudden rush? I can only think that it's political and politically motivated, and that is unfortunate and goes against everything the mayor spoke about a couple of days before the last election. So support this referral, please.
Okay, that's it for speakers to the referral motion. I'll call the question. The voting screen is up. Everyone would vote on the referral motion from Councillor Affleck. Councillor Stevenson, you haven't got yours in yet. There we go. Okay. The results are in. Of 11 votes, 4 in favor and 7 in opposition. So the referral motion does not pass. And we will go back to the main motion. And I don't have anyone left in that queue. I will just to maybe my closing thoughts on this motion, mainly in response to Councillor Affleck's final statement there. I don't think there's anything confusing about this at all. I think the current model is very confusing, and that's why I have made these recommendations. There's, as I said, show me another city that uses a rotating councillor model for deputy mayor roles or acting mayor roles. I have yet to see that, and I think this is a much clearer model that every other city follows, as well as being important that we are making these recommendations today. They certainly respect the clarity that's in the Vancouver Charter. I think it's a good next step to build on the language that is in the Charter. but I don't think there's anything confusing about it, and I don't think it has any relevance with respect to how we work together as council here at this table, or the parties that we have just been elected with. I think this is a pretty simple administrative step to bring some more clarity to the deputy mayor and acting mayor role, and I look forward to future steps to ensure that the succession and responsibilities of that related to availability are clarified, and the compensation piece, as I said. So I'll call the question on the original motion. If you can vote now on your screens. Okay, votes are in. 11 total votes, 7 in favor and 4 in opposition, and that motion carries. Thank you, Council. We're on to communication number 2, which contains my recommendations for the appointment of standing committee chairs and vice chairs, and for a nomination subcommittee and its membership for the term December the 8th, 2014 to December 31st, 2015. And again, I'll move those recommendations. Councillor Louis will second. And any discussion on communication 2 on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call question. All those in favor of the motion, vote on screen now. Okay, and the votes are in. The results are 11 in favor. That is unanimous. Thank you, Council. We're on to communication number 3, which is my recommendations for the appointment of council representatives to regional bodies for the period of today to the end of next year, 2015. I'll move those recommendations. Ask for a seconder. Councillor Deal seconds. And any debate on this motion? Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I noticed that in the last 3 years, in the last session, term, that the appointments were for the entire term, and that this time the appointments that you're recommending are for 1 year to Metro Vancouver. And well, all of the appointments are for 1 year. And I'm wondering if that is because you anticipate there being a change in those appointments over time, or is there some other reason why there's been a switch in your recommendation from 3 year, well, in this case it would have been 4 year to 1 year?
Yeah, thanks for the question. My rationale here was that 3 years was already a long period of time for a full-time commitment. The Metro duties can be quite significant in terms of workload, and when contemplating making 4-year appointments, I thought, well, it seems like a long time to sign off on at the beginning of the term. I'm anticipating that our lives will change in various ways, and that over the course of the 4 years, having flexibility to renew appointments or change who's appointed, whether as directors or alternates, just enables some flexibility and reflects that people may want to do different things. People may not be able to maintain a workload and wish to be working on other pieces. So this enables more flexibility. Certainly, I think we see it with other councils and appointees to Metro and other bodies around the region. So I felt it was a good practice to do this more often versus a 4-year appointment, and enable some more flexibility and understanding that changes happen in life, and council should have the prerogative to make those changes annually.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Affleck to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I've been concerned about in the last 3 years is that I have only attended one Metro meeting as the alternate, and that, it turns out that the alternate I was for, he did not let me know on the 3 or 4 other occasions that he was not in attendance, and I think that's unfortunate because I believe it puts us in a vulnerable position at Metro. So I'd like to just add some wording to this motion. I'd like to add the words further that should a Metro director not be able to attend a Metro Vancouver board meeting, he or she is required to inform his alternate immediately. Sorry, I said, oh, sorry, I said, I meant he or she, yeah. His or her, he or she. It, what do you like? They.
You got that language, Madam Clerk?
I think it's important for us to ensure that all of us are aware, especially those who are acting as directors on Metro Vancouver, to let those councillors know when they can't attend, so that those 4 or 5 votes are not lost on the floor.
So just ask the clerks to read out the motion as it is currently worded.
So I urge
Have
your
the
support for
language
this. I think it's fairly straightforward. It's a simple addition. I know we talk about it, but I don't think it's embedded in previous reports. So I ask the mayor's indulgence. Hopefully it's friendly. I think it just clarifies to all of us, the councillors here, that they're supposed to let us know when they're not attending. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go to the amendment queue on that. Councillor Louis, current Vice Chair of Metro.
I believe that it is already within the bylaws, but I don't see a problem with adding some language here that's confirmation that that's the practice. Give some clarity to this, that it is a Metro Vancouver Board Directors Board meeting, that there are alternates at Metro Vancouver. There are no alternates at the subcommittee levels, and this motion should not be interpreted that way for his or her meeting, because there are a number of meetings that's undertaken at Metro Vancouver for a number of different subjects and matters relating to services that we provide at Metro Vancouver. So maybe some language that not able to attend his or her board meeting.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Councillor Reimer.
That I wanted to speak to you. I'm a bit ambivalent about voting for this. I found myself in an emergency room for about 15 hours a couple of years ago. And I know Councillor Carr was quite upset that I wasn't able to give her notice, but unfortunately due to a number of factors, including my lack of consciousness, I just physically was not able to give notice. If we pass this rule, there's no provision in there for that kind of a situation. Also, when we're Metro directors, we have our own fiduciary responsibilities to Metro, and I can't find it on the notice I was given on this amendment, but I'm quite certain in the bylaw, their procedural bylaw, there's language which reiterates this concept. So, and I appreciate that's not in our role as councillor, it's a fiduciary duty of being a director. What I might suggest is that we, I don't know where we'd refer this to, but maybe put some thought into this to make sure that it aligns with the language in the Metro bylaw and also deals with the exceptional circumstances issue. I guess what would be most helpful is Councillor Affleck would withdraw and bring it back with some more thought around those pieces, but if that's not possible, then I'm happy to move to refer it till such time as these issues are. Perhaps we could refer it to staff for more information on the Metro bylaw and how we make sure that exceptional circumstances do not result in your removal from Metro simply because you have an emergency medical procedure.
Okay, maybe I'll check in with Councillor Affleck with.
Well, no, I don't think there's any need to refer. I think we heard from the vice chair of Metro that he's comfortable with it. So I don't quite understand what the apprehension is from Councillor Reimer. Perhaps some wording that might make her feel a bit more comfortable about that. We all have and share assistants here. I know that maybe in your situation that might have been challenging to reach, but there is no punishment attached to this or anything that respects regarding that. So it's really simply.
Councillor Affleck, I'm just to go back a bit. If you're not amenable to this, then She was moving
Well,
a
there was nothing
referral
on the
motion.
floor, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that was giving you the opportunity to accept as friendly, but, or to retract, and in this case, Councillor Reimer has the floor.
Issue of consciousness and not being able to be conscious enough to contact anyone.
Okay, so got an amendment queue open here on the referral motion to staff. Any speakers to that? Councillor Affleck?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I sort of touched on it. I think that, as Councillor Louis stated, this doesn't seem to contravene anything that's related to Metro. It sort of matches up from his understanding. I think we should respect the Vice Chair of the Metro Board's opinion on my motion, my addition. However, Councillor Reimer doesn't obviously have that opinion. So, you know, and I think that, again, it's...
Sorry, I was trying very hard. I know there's a number of situations. I could have called one on today for procedure bylaw issues, Councillor Affleck, but really it's not up to you to decide what my opinion is or isn't. I stated very clearly what issues I had. The procedure bylaw does not allow you to put words into my mouth.
I apologize. I was not putting words in your mouth. I meant simply to state the fact that Councillor Louis, has, the Vice Chair of the Metro Board, has endorsed my, from what I understand, maybe I misunderstood him, my addition to the Mayor's report. And I would urge us, it's not a big ask. I think it's something that we think, you know, we all agree that this is something that all of the directors should do. It's simply reiterating that to ensure that that does happen. It's the proper thing to do, and I don't see why we can't support it. And so I don't support the referral of the simple addition. I think we can deal with this today and move on and have a good governance here in Vancouver and in Metro.
Okay, Councillor Carr to the referral motion from Councillor Reimer.
Yes. I am supporting the referral motion. Actually, before Councillor Reimer spoke, I was, in fact, jotting down wording to amend Councillor Affleck's motion that captured, in fact, the extenuating circumstances that Councillor Reimer found herself in regarding her medical emergency, because I wanted to find some wording that would accommodate that kind of circumstance. So I think it's fine to refer it, get some wording that can reflect some of the range of issues that might arise regarding the must inform, and make sure that the language is commensurate with the Metro Van language. I don't see that this is anything but just making sure that it is fair to the alternates, but also fair under extenuating circumstances to the director themselves.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Councillor Jang.
Right, Mr. Mayor, I will support the referral. Councillor Affleck's comments about him not attending Metro aimed squarely at me, I'd say, is because he was my alternate. And let's be clear, instead of, when there was some issues with my attendance, instead of talking to me, he decided to go on Twitter and talk about it to media instead of actually doing the proper thing and asking what had happened. So what had actually happened in those occasions, that there was 2 scheduling errors made by my assistant. We've had a number of changes of assistants because we all share 1/3 each, and I was in between, and then I actually showed up to Metro and nobody was there. So it's not only you, it was a very big inconvenience to me. And I will say, though, that when I was lying in hospital, I did made sure, when I was lying there with an aneurysm, bleeding in my head, that I made sure that Councillor Affleck did not miss Metro, and he went. So just to be absolutely clear, mistakes happen. It can happen administratively. It can happen due to medical issues. And, you know, to say you must, you do your very best to inform. And that's what I would have done if I had known. But it's also incumbent on the alternate to say, hey, how come you weren't there? To find out what the issues are before going public and trying to embarrass somebody publicly. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stevenson is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll also vote in favor of this referral, although I want to say to Councillor Affleck, I do think this is a very helpful motion and one that should be spelled out as it is. But I know from experience with Councillor Reimer, when she has a question mark about any issue and these kind of procedural things, it's really good to pay attention because she's somewhat usually of an expert in them. So I think she's raising a concern, and as you say, it's not a big ask, but it is an important ask, and I don't see how just a little delay on this will affect it at all. In the meantime, we're all very now aware, all of us who are on Metro, as a result of this discussion, to make sure that alternates are informed if that happens in the next month or so.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, and Councillor Louis is next. No, you're my.
To shift over. As the Vice Chair of Metro, we have a separate, distinct fiduciary responsibility to the region. When we sit as Metro directors, we are to think as regional directors and not as Vancouver City Councils, and that is very clear. And that's why there's a separate procedure bylaw, and it's quite detailed, and when it's silent, we move to the rules that govern the Legislative Assembly. What I said earlier is that I do believe that we need to ensure that we have representation at Metro Vancouver whenever a board meeting is undertaken. And I see no issues with giving opportunity to the alternates who we as council have decided as appropriate to sit at that board table to represent the City of Vancouver as an appointee, but ultimately to think about the region when making those types of decisions. I think the offending word that is up on the screen is required. That is the offending word, and Councillor Reimer is right that there may be some differences in requirements of what the Metro Vancouver procedure bylaw might state and the Legislative Assembly rules might state to what we believe to be the case. It is, I think, prudent for us to do some investigation. But, you know, if we remove that offending word and move it to some language more in line with the member, inform their alternate whenever possible, because, as Councillor Reimer described, it's near impossible to do that when you are unconscious. And so when you are required and yet it's a physical impossibility, that creates, of course, a problem. So, you know, this is, I think, some language that might satisfy. We'll have to go through this vote, but certainly I look to Councillor Reimer on, rather than having us delay this, I think it is a simple solution to the problem that we are required when it's physically impossible.
Okay. Well, I'll, speaking to Councillor Reimer's referral motion, I would speak in favor of Councillor Louis' suggestion that we just we vote against Councillor Reimer's referral motion. We go back to Councillor Affleck's motion, adjust the wording so that it reflects circumstances where it's impossible. So we want these appointments to be made. I think it is timely for that, and my suggestion is what I will be doing is voting against this referral motion and looking forward to an adjustment in the wording to reflect whenever possible, and there are circumstances in which it may be impossible for councillors to communicate that. But okay, Councillor Reimer, you have last word on your.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't suggesting we delay the amendments because it would be very challenging to actively participate in Friday's meeting without that. And I think it is important that Vancouver have representation there. You know, I'm fine with it. I would say that I will personally be checking into the bylaw at Metro. I'm fine with this wherever possible business. You might have it's fine. But I will check into the bylaw because I do think, for Councillor Stevenson's point, I am particularly sensitive to governance conundrums, and I think we're about to create one, but we can uncreate it when the time comes to do that.
Okay, so to the referral motion, I have no further speakers. We will now vote on the referral motion. And Councillor Ball, do you have? No, we have to vote on it, so. Okay, the vote's in, and we have 11 votes all in opposition. So that referral motion does not pass. We will go back to the main motion Councillor Affleck had on table. I have Councillor I had Councillor Reimer speaking to it. Councillor Louis, you were next on the queue, I believe. And
Then I will move the amendment, an amendment to the motion, striking the words after the comma, and insert the words the member inform their alternate whenever possible. The member inform their alternate whenever possible. In replacement of he/c, be required to inform his/her alternate.
okay.
As reflected in the language set up by the clerk. I would say, though, that rather than Councillor Reimer having done this work, I would ask verbally, rather than put it into the motion, I could ask and coordinate with the Secretary at Metro Vancouver, who would be more than willing, I think, to share the information and have staff bring that information back to us.
Okay, so we have an amendment queue here, and any speakers to Councillor Louis' additional language on top of Councillor Affleck's piece. Councillor Affleck, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I could try to keep you here until 11 o'clock if I could really get going here. And I'm fine with that alternate. That's fine. I think the intention is still there. It's really about providing assurance to all of us that we are informed and that we can attend, that all of us who are alternates or non-alternates can attend. So it's fine. I accept it.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, Councillor Reimer.
There was an issue brought up earlier around the 4 years of appointment or full-term appointments versus not full-term appointments. I did want to say that of all of the things that we revisit, we have revisited appointments on this particular sheet many times over the last 3 years because people's life circumstances change, because for whatever reason it makes sense because of an issue that we're trying to advance at UBCM or LMLGA or whatever. So I think that it is why most councils have a practice of doing annual appointments, not full-term appointments. So I think it's actually a very positive move forward to move to one-year appointments for this.
Okay. We're ready to vote on the amendment that adds that language.
I thought we were on the main motion, sorry.
Okay.
He said yes, but we're going to go.
Okay, results are in. 11 votes in favor of that additional language. Thank you for that. And we're back to the main motion with the additional amended language. So any speakers to that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, vote now, and those opposed? Okay. We have 10 votes in. Okay. 10 votes, and all 10 are in favor. So the motion carries, and we have completed item number 3, communication number 3 on those regional bodies representatives. So we're on to communication number 4, which contains my recommendations for the appointment of council representatives to the Hastings Institute Board and Vancouver Public Library Board for the appointment of councillor liaisons to statutory committees. And I'll move those. I need a seconder. I hear Councillor Jang seconds. And any speakers to Communication 4? All those in favor of, or sorry, we go to the voting screen. I'm still adapting to this mechanized process. Okay, votes are in. 11 votes all in favor. And communication number 4 is approved unanimously. And our final communication is communication number 5 from the City Clerk putting forward the proposed 2015 Council meeting schedule for consideration. Would someone like to move? Councillor Deal moves. A seconder. Councillor Jang, all those in, first of all, any debate on this? Anyone wish to speak to the Council meeting schedule? Seeing none, I will call the vote. Okay, the votes are in, and all 11 are in favor, so that carries unanimously. And we have completed the 5 communication items on our agenda. We need a motion to adjourn this first meeting of council. Councillor Ball, and seconded. No, we don't. Not at this meeting. Yeah. That'll be next week when we come back. You can do that next week. Okay. Councillor, we didn't have a seconder for that, did we? Councillor Louis seconds. Okay, all those in favor of adjournment? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.